So hope that more student will join soon. I'll just start my lecture with the screen sharing. So let us let us start this particular session, keeping in view that this particular lecture on interview method. This will be a kind of you can understand in continuation with my earlier lecture, which was recruitment and selection. And while we discussed about the selection process, we discussed about the testing of you know skills, skill test, mental test, psychological test, and followed by an interaction or interview, which is an important part before your physical induction of particular candidate to the job. So I will try to cover up all the details about the interview, and there are some examples of different type of questions which will also which will also be covered in this particular session. So when we talk about this interview is simply an exchange of information between two people. One maybe an employer side, if you are giving for a job, and this exchange of information or interaction may not be a balanced one. One may be in position psychologically to evaluate other. However, the process is two-way process. When interviewer is thinking that he or she is interviewing someone, simultaneously the candidate is also trying to evaluate interviewers, trying to evaluate company, trying to understand the overall job itself. So you can say that and process of knowing about the candidate beyond the resume, whatever you have written down in your CV or resume, that is one thing. But what is not written down in your resume, the aim of this, usually the aim of interview is to understand what is not written down in resume, matching those skills or your characteristics or your thinking which is not written down in job description. So it is investigation into some newer skills, potential area or arena, and identifying some unspecified qualities which you may not have displayed or you may not have written down. So interview is something where you can understand that what for you are giving interview, that defines the overall setup of interview. Meaning thereby you need to understand what are the objective of interviews. So if you talk about objective of interviews or purposes, So you can say that the information that is extracted during your interview is supposed to supplement resume. That means whatever you have written down in resume, that information should not contradict your resume information. It must supplement. That means the interview outcome or the information extraction should be in line with the resume information. That is very important. It must show your strength and weaknesses. It must show that you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, and why strength and weaknesses are needed. That means a purpose of this strength and weaknesses, and how to utilize or use these strength and weaknesses. Interview usually enables employer to evaluate your personality and attitude. Obviously, when you go for an interview for, say, for example, salesperson or sales executive, then it tells about your attitude towards sales as a position. It is important to understand that whatever you are behaving towards a particular job, that also indicate the level of understanding about the job, level of understanding about the organization. That means how much you know about the job, how much you know about the organization, how much you know about the activities involved in a particular job. So since the purpose of understanding from interviewer side is that how much you know about the job, so you can get answer that what you need to prepare. And it also helps interviewer as well as interviewee to understand the demands or desires of each other. That means what additional thing company wants from a candidate and what additional thing a candidate wants from company. So this can be, an outcome or this the outcome of any interview. In short, purpose of interview is, lying in three main points. Can you do the job? That means the skills, attributes, knowledge, experience, understanding about the job you have or not. Second purpose is of interviewers, will you do the job? Now, can you do the job? That is one thing, focuses on your knowledge skills. Will you do the job means it focus on your behavior side, enthusiasm, how much enthusiastic you are, how much commitment that you can show, how much loyalty you do have with the particular post or position, or understanding about your loyalty towards the job. And third point is that will you fit in? That means the personality, the attitude, whether you fit in company, you fit with the job, you fit with the team, existing team. So they try to make a perfect match. Now if you look at that, how many types of interviews usually, if you commonly understand about the types of interviews, so these are some of the very common type of interviews that are being conducted. Structured interview is basically an interview where everything is pre-planned and there is no scope of inserting any newer thing during interview. So structured interview means it has to be everything static. That means who will take what would be the panel, what is the situation, what is the overall ecosystem, how the candidate will be placed before that interviewers, how many how many points or domains or areas where the questionnaire or questions will be asked. So everything will be finalized, the type of interview and the type of questions. The every setup is pre-planned, and beyond that setup, no interviewer usually or no person involved in that process will ask question. That means everything is pre-planned. Now these type of structured interviews are conducted especially in those situations or in those positions where you do have things or job description and specification very well established. That means if a company is already having a established position and activities and everything is already settled down, the job activities, the specifications, the qualifications, the experience, so everything is well written down. So in that case you can go for a structured interview. There are unstructured interviews where you do not have a proper sequence of asking questions, sequence of areas of questions, sequence or the system or setup. So random interviews, that means the things which are not planned, unplanned activities, unplanned systems. Say for example, in some interviews everything is planned. You know that 15-minute interview will be there, and after 15 minutes there will be 5 minutes activity or interaction or just a get together. So everything is fixed. But in unstructured interviews things are not fixed. That means the activities, the questions, the setup, and nothing is pre-planned, unstructured. So for example, you talk about the group interviews. Group interview means where there are more than one candidates which are being interviewed at the same time, and when a panel of interviewer interviews a panel of candidates, so that is basically group interviews. This type of interview is required when you have a very high number of applicants, candidates, and you have either a sort of time limitation or a sort of some other constraints are there. So in that case you try to organize group interviews. It happens in some time, like in students final viva, sometime 2-3 students are called for interview at the same time. So that is called group interview, where when question is asked to one student or one candidate, the other candidate is provoked and then behavior is studied. So group interview is usually very sensitive interview. That means as a member of that group, candidate must understand their turn, their timing, and their intervening into the answering process. So that become very crucial. Depth interviews are basically the structured interviews usually where you need to look into in-depth knowledge testing or skill testing or experience. Say for example, when situational interviews are taken, they are usually depth interviews. Situational interview means they give you a situation where you are supposed to take decision. So they want to understand in-depth understanding about the situation. So usually, no, if you understand the higher positions, so in higher positions, depth interviews are conducted usually. Depth interviews are not conducted at entry level positions. Senior positions, depth interviews are conducted usually. Then there are, stress interviews. Stress interviews are basically conducted to check the candidates handling the skill of handling pressure. That means whether your performance, your knowledge, your skill implementation, your behavior changes when pressure comes on you or not. So stress interviews are a bit, important to understand the, dark side of personality, or investigate into dark side of personality, rather than exactly domain knowledge testing. So they try to say, for example, one interviewer may ask question, and before you answer the question, second interviewer will ask question, then third will ask question. So they are not basically interested in your answer, they are interested in your pressure handling technique, how you handle pressure, and whether your behavior is remaining same or not. The purpose of stress interview is also to understand, uh, whether when you come in stress, you start showing your natural behavior, not modified one. You show your natural language, not modified one. You show your natural attitude, not modified one. Because usually when you enter into interview panel, it happens that your modified behavior is a face of your interview. Sometimes it happens you don't know, you don't know particular language, but you speak in that language. You don't have knowledge about, you may be very shrewd in thinking, but you try to show that you are very simple. Sometimes your attitude you try to hide from interviewers. So they give you stress, they give you pressure, so that your natural behavior comes out. And from this point of view, stress interviews are very important. The panel interviews. Panel interview means, obviously in a structured interview there is a panel who interview you, and in that panel every member of the panel do have a specific domain or objective to test. So there is a little bit difference from a structured interview with a panel. In panel interview, each expert is from one, for one particular purpose. Say for example, one behavioral expert would be there, one subject knowledge expert would be there, one psychologist, psychiatrist would be there, one sociologist would be there, or meaning thereby that there are different heterogeneous group or panel who interview you and try to extract different information of different domain. And this assessment centers is a concept which is nowadays common. Rather than conducting interview directly in a professional touch or professional manner, the candidates are put into assessment centers where they are being given a series of tasks or series of events, asked to perform on event, play a role, do a task, and while doing this all, the assessment process is going on certain fixed parameters. Say for example, I can tell you that very commonly, a very famous episode or rather a game on television, which is Big Boss. What they check in Big Boss? A kind of assessment center which checks your behavior when you are in tension, when you are in pressure, when you are in stress, when you are in group. So in every situation, they try to assess you. And sometimes it may be mutual assessment. You assess one member, other member assess you. And then based on that, your rating or ranking is decided. So assessment centers are nowadays very common. You are given 1 to 3 days assessment center life, and then round the clock you are monitored. And the moment you become casual on any task, on any activity or event, so that become a weak point. So you need to learn about the assessment centers. This is a newer type of your method of interviewing nowadays. Now, if I talk about that, what approach to follow for preparing interview. So I believe that there are 3 major steps. 1, research. 2, prepare. And 3rd, practice. Now, what to research? Research about the job description, job specification. Research about the organization in which you are going to give interview, their status, their financial position, their history, their background. You need to research yourself also. And you need to understand that where you fit in that job and organization. So this research is very important. Suppose you are going to give interview in TCS company and you don't know about the job. Interviewer know the job for which they are selecting, but candidate is not knowing about the job. Knowing the job doesn't mean that knowing the title of the job. Knowing the job means knowing the job description, which we have discussed in job analysis. Second step is prepare yourself for possible questions, possible situations, hypothetical, questions which may be asked, and questions related to job, question related to organization, question related to you. The question will be either related to job or related to organization or related to you. So your research will help you in preparing these questions and answers. So prepare questions and then practice to answer these questions. Practice to solve these problems, situations. Practice to handle these situations. Practice to understand and solve issues, maybe that virtual issues. We will discuss some of the questions in later part of this particular session. Look at the common questions which are asked in interview. If you look at the types of questions, traditional questions like tell us about yourself. Now, this tell us about yourself doesn't mean you start, telling your family, your father, your mother, your brother, your, mama ji, your mami ji, your mausa ji, nothing like that. Tell us about yourself simply means all those relevant informations which is linked to the job. Your skill, your knowledge, your experience, your any activity that you are involved in related to that. Like another type of question may be, why did you apply for this job? The question is very simple, but answer is very difficult. It is not that you simply say that you applied for this job because you want to have, a good job, your company is good. These answers are, weak answers. The good answer may be that this job fascinated you. This job is, you like most of the job activities. You can say that your nature, your thinking, your attitude matches with the job. So you need to prepare yourself. It is not that you only research on questions. You need to prepare on yourself. What can you offer us? This is a common question that company asks to candidates. Where do you see yourself in 5 years down the line? Now this question is very important, and you will not be able to answer until unless you are not aware about the job, you are not aware about the job promotions, you are not aware about the job activities, job specifications. So actually indirectly they are asking that where do you see yourself in 5 years, means on the particular job, how much time usually a person takes to promote or to get promoted to next level. So you need to understand these things. What is your greatest weakness or strength, or this one is very common. So you need to look at that you give strength which is matching to your job, and try to give your weakness which can be from other side become a strength. Now other question may be that have you any question for us? This, usually I would suggest that try to avoid these questions, this type of question or similar question. Apart from traditional questions, there may be some competency based questions. So for example, tell us about a time when you worked as a member of team. What part did you play? What difficulties did you encounter? What did you do about this? What would you do differently next time if you face same situation? Now, this tests your competency level. Maybe that they ask you that tell us about a time when you solved a problem. I tell you that this second question that I am mentioning, competency based question, this question is the single question that this Tesla company owner Elon Musk asked in most of the top profile positions. And the single question that that fellow asked, that fellow simply asked that tell us about a time when you solved a problem. What was the problem? How do you go about solving it? What would you do differently next time, or something like that? That means, this question, when you answer, reflect your competence. Situational question, maybe like what would you do as a team leader if a member of your team was not pulling his or weight in a task, or you have a conflict with someone who is senior to you and is not your supervisor. Describe how would you handle it. That means, a conflicting situation, that you are given a conflicting situation and you are asked to answer it. Now this is very sort of different situation which test your balance approach, conflicting approach. There may be some creative question segment. Hypothetical, if you had absolute power in whole world tomorrow, what would be the first thing you would do? Very common type of questions where you need to apply your creativity, and your answer should not be that you will become Osama bin Laden or something like that. Like these type of questions which are usually asked in Miss World competition or those type of things. And most of the time the answer is something social, something charitable, something for humankind. So you need to look into these type of situations, which will ultimately help you to have a creative thinking. And you need to understand how to handle these type of questions, how to convert the situation into your favor when you are you know answering in an interview.